Okay? How does that come about? Of what use is it? How helpful is it? Now this I won't avoid, anyway, as my uncle used to say, and then he'd jump. The reason for these menus was because liberalization opened opportunities for a certain type of person, in my view. Don't forget that is the time we had just finished, I think, the first round of loot in Congo. Okay? No, let's be very serious. The Uganda army went into Congo twice and robbed the place. And there's a court ruling against us to that effect. 10 billion United States dollars. And one day we're going to have to pay. Okay? A lot of people who are not necessarily directly connected to the army made a lot of money out of Congo. In those days, to start a media house like a radio station, it would cost you about $200,000. It was about 50 million for the license, rather for the transmitting, the main transmitter. Then about 3 to 4 million for the license. Then you had to rent space and fly in all these pre-packaged materials from South Africa. And of course, some useful Muzungu expert who became an expert when he landed at Entebbe Airport to assemble the whole thing and take your people through training. I'm not talking about you, sir. And then you're off. The kinds of people who had $200,000 to spare in cash or credit at that time were people who were connected to the looting of Congo. And the people who were connected to the looting of Congo were all NRM people. This is why most of the media houses ended up being owned by NRM or pro-NRM people, whether openly or secretly. Okay? Now, when you study a media house, you then find that to find an actual journalist making decisions there, you had to go from step 1 to step 2 because you have your board of directors whom are like the actual owners. And those are the people who put up the cash. And what they call business people and industrialists and investors. And none of them have media training as a general rule. I actually did a study about this. Okay, none of them. They're MAs, they're people who have been doing various things. They're good at business, okay, in terms of making investments. Then below there you have the MD, who is normally connected to somebody on the board. And this is somebody with some kind of good management experience, you know, maybe an MBA holder or whatever. And then below that you have the assistants to the MD. They sometimes divide, one goes towards the business section, that is the marketing, collecting advertising revenue, and the other one is in charge of the product, you know, managing the journalists and the entertainers who go live on air. And you might find that these ones don't have journalist experience either. You then finally get down to the head of the newsroom, who, depending on their attitude, can be the happiest or the most miserable person in the world. My former head of newsroom is here, so I'll stop there. But that is where you might bump into your first actual journalist in the management structure of this media organization. Okay? So therefore, when tricky issues come to the table, it is the weakest voice that might be the one trying to raise issues of media freedom and integrity. Are you getting what I'm saying? Everyone at board level, they're saying, how will this affect our investment? Okay? The MD is saying, how do I protect the board's interests so they don't get annoyed with me? The assistants to the MD are saying, I don't want to annoy the boss. Okay? The one in charge of marketing is also saying, how will this annoy the advertisers? Okay, so by the time you have a decision as to which way to go with a particular story, the voice of journalism is actually, one, the minority voice, and two, the voice that is seen to be the least important in terms of the thinking of the organization, which is, we invested in this organization to make money. Okay, now you want to tell us about frogs and butterflies. These are the kind of things they say if you're talking about environmental journalism. You say, oh, such and such an industrialist is filling the wetlands. And they'll say, but have you any idea how much advertising they do on this, in this media house? And you want to talk to us about frogs and butterflies. This is the kind of thing that they say. Okay? And it goes across the board in terms of political decisions and so on. So you find that you can't really go very far at that level. So what do we do instead? We become You know, like these cattle you see in some of these neighborhoods that are trying to become middle class, you know, Konge, places like that. I'm not disrespecting them. I live around there, and I've always lived around there. But you know, early in the morning or sometimes in the afternoon, you find these cattle being herded. And there's some guy walking with them. I actually used to talk to these guys, because you have to, because they block the road. So you might as well have a conversation, what to do. So I asked one, you know, how come whenever I talk to you guys, you say these aren't your cattle, how do you then look after them? And he said, no, it's really very simple. In the morning, he said, all these people own cows. All your neighbors own cows, 1, 2, like that, behind their gates. So in the morning, he goes and gets the first cow or cows from the first house and starts walking. And as he passes the other houses, the other cows come out and join in. So by the time he reaches where he's taking them to graze, he has assembled a herd, but from many different homes. And then the reverse is the same. And I actually once sat somewhere and watched it. If you walk with these cows, when they reach their gate, they turn off and go into their particular home. And he continues until he's down to 0, and he also goes away. That sometimes reminds me of the way we practice journalism in Uganda today. You come out of many, many, many different media houses and move in the same direction, to the same press conference, to the same drama. And then on your way back, you break off to your different media houses. Because you see, when those cows are grazing, they're all having the same experience. Okay? So whatever they are discussing with their owners when they get back in the gate, because the owner might say, hey, you know, cow, how was your day? And he says, oh, well, you know, we were down there. The grass wasn't so good, but the water isn't as dirty as it used to be. Okay? Wonderful. And you find every single cow is telling the same story to its owner inside the gate. This brings me to the question of the news of the day, the things we're talking about now. And that's why this is where I become a bit disturbed. How, in the name of all that is good and holy, is Dr. Gilbert Bukenya a subject of news in Uganda today? How? How does this happen to be the case? I'm not disrespecting him, he's a medical doctor. The one who disrespects medical doctors is President Museveni, because he said that his long career being security conscious has taught him not to trust Ugandan doctors. This is a written letter to the New Vision, if anyone thinks I'm making this up. This was in defense of having his daughter flown to have a baby in Germany. By the time he wrote that letter, he was on his 3rd vice president, who was also a medical doctor. Because you had Dr. Samson Chiseka, then Dr. Kaziwe, and then Dr. Gilbert Bukenya. I think he was already VP by that time. Why is it that this man's issues around this gentleman can make the front page, or even the 3rd page of a newspaper? I know videotape is much cheaper than it used to be when I started in journalism. For us, we used to use something called a U-matic tape, which was enormous. Sometimes the camera had a separate recorder. It ran for 30 minutes and cost 50,000 shillings. And 50,000 shillings in those days was a fortune, even today for a journalist. I'm being serious. If you decided that each journalist to ask them to put 50,000 shillings on the table, everyone would suddenly get calls from their newsroom that actually is an urgent thing we have to go and attend to. Okay? Now digital tape is much cheaper, what, 7,000? You keep going. Some people are even using hard drives. But still, why are we rolling videotape on this gentleman? At what point does a story cease to be a story? When can a story be allowed to expire? What criteria do we use to decide that somebody or something is still important? Okay? Put in another way, what significant contribution has this gentleman made to the development of this country? What useful thing did he do while he was vice president? Why is it important that a man who once said that, Nze Museveni mulaba mwaka ama, do you remember that? Is now criticizing him, and nobody has yet asked him that question. If we all, you know, if he stands up and talks, I mean, this is a former vice president. If there's an opportunity to embarrass him, People used to think that I went to Radio 1 to try and embarrass journalists, which I never used to, embarrass politicians, which I never used to want to do, but I wanted to know. Okay. And that's why sometimes we'd get stuck on one question. Because to me, if he told me that he saved the country, that was the secret he saw. Number one, that's not a secret. Okay. That's a very widely held opinion by many people, whether we agree with them or not. Okay. Two, if President Museveni is said to have saved this country, it's a process that began, depending on who you listen to, coming from Chankwanzi, either in 1966, 67, or 1972, or 1986, or possibly even 1895, depending on who you talk to. Now, the point is, if he saved the country, is the country no longer saved? Is he unsaving the country? Did you see what I'm saying? What has fundamentally changed in that basic assessment? Okay. To me, it's a completely fatuous type of response. And it's one of the reasons I was not so attracted to print journalism. Because if you have a gentleman like that in a radio studio, you can then just have fun. You just get stuck on that point for the rest of the program. You know, that how, do you know the meaning of the word secret? How is that a secret? Okay. So how has he stopped saving the country? Okay. When did he stop saving the country? Because some people have been saying from 86 that he has never saved the country. Are you now agreeing with those people? Or are you seeing a different kind of unsaving or saving or what? In other words, are you an idiot? Okay. In my view, speaking humbly, I think we should not allow our intelligence to be insulted. In some cases, everyone has a right to speak and to have a political opinion. We have a right to know and to remember as journalism. It's what Mr. Mugisha was saying about history. Okay? Somebody cannot reinvent them themselves in front of you, and you also allow them to do that. I think that is a disservice to the audience. You don't want to remind people of where a person has come from. Okay? The second example is General Tinyefuza. Okay? Which is a literal act of reinvention because he has attempted to change his name. I always felt the real story was why he had changed his name, because my understanding, and I might be wrong, but I heard this in about 1985, was that actually Sejusa is his original name, okay, which he then changed to Tinyefuza. So to me, the question would be, as a journalist, number one, why are you changing your name back? Okay? Did you see what I'm saying? So now we have this gentleman telling us this story. So to me, the question is not that he didn't change his name. He changed his name back. Okay? And that to me is where I would have started from. Okay? And to do it, to say that, okay, why did you change your name back? Why have you changed your name back now? But then, whatever explanation he gives, my next question is, why did you change it in the first place? Okay? Why did you used to call yourself Tinyefuza? Okay? But you can't ask that second question until you have got him to concede that the name he's calling himself now is his original name. Okay? Then, and I'll come to it in more detail later, we then have a very long and interesting discussion about the years 1986 to 1996. Okay? Those were years of, at some point, a very, very terrible war in northern Uganda, which, because of the silence of people like him, has been mischaracterized as a war against the LRA, and before that a war against an army-led militia, or a mob led by a woman called Alice Lakwena. Okay? The war in northern Uganda was started by an organization called the Uganda People's Democratic Movement. Okay? Its chairman was a man called Eric Otema Alimadi. He used to be the former prime minister during the Obote II period. It was the collapse of that war that led to these offshoots. Okay? And the point is, why did the war start? What were the politics? You can see it's very easy from a politician's point of view. Any opportunistic politician would rather have to have an argument with someone like Joseph Kony, who claims to be some kind of spirit in the flesh, or someone like Alice Lakwena, who claims to be hearing from God, than to have a debate with someone like Eric Otema-Alimadi. Okay? Because Eric Otema-Alimadi is a far more conventional type of politician and is more likely to raise standard political arguments, especially about the human rights abuses that were being committed by the NRA at that time. And many people believe that General Tinyefuza might be better informed than most people about the dates and times and details of those atrocities. Okay? Now, I am not sure where somebody would start with this gentleman, because his association with the NRA, PRA, now UPDF is very long. But a lot of these things happened while he was among those people. Okay? I recently read an article by accident where he was fulminating about certain things having been done to certain people even during the Bush War. What we need, again, is the same kind of interrogative approach. How many people are familiar with the political career of this gentleman to feel qualified enough to go and interview him on substantive questions? Okay? I would start with a very simple one. How is it that, given the human rights record of this regime, which you are also now condemning, especially its disregard for constitutionalism, how is it that so many of the generals in this army and senior officers are not just lawyers, but sometimes highly qualified in human rights law? Because Colonel Mayombo had a master's degree in human rights law. I don't think he was a colonel by the time he died, I don't know. General Kaihura is a lawyer. Tinyefuza is a lawyer. General, I believe it is, Otafire is a lawyer. He's not. Oh, he's a surgeon. Okay, political science, that's even worse. But anyway, it's a general question I ask. If you go to the statistics, 8 million Ugandans are registered as Anglicans, and about 13 million are registered as Catholics, and 4 to 5 million are registered as Muslims. And as I like to say, 99% of those are also all registered as people who practice traditional religion, but I don't want to offend anybody. But my point is this. If you look at the participation, apart from the statistics themselves, the participation of Ugandans in their religious communities, if you see how full the churches get in this country on a Sunday, and how busy the mosques are on a Friday, and how religion is a very critical part of political identity in this country, you also have to ask yourself, how come in these last 50 years, Uganda also has one of the highest records of people killing each other in the name of politics? You can go back to the 10 Commandments. One of them is that thou shalt not kill. That definitely applies to at least 2 of these major religions. So how come all these Christians are able to kill each other all the time? It's the same question I'm asking. How come such a big collection of lawyers can run a regime that violates constitutional law and human rights, and nobody sees a contradiction? So I would not be interested in terms of General Tinyefuza in who did what to who when. I would be interested in the culture from which he comes politically, and trying to understand how he understands it. How does he explain that? Okay? Because I've heard him on radio say that if you're caught infiltrating the intelligence services, you will be shot. Okay? He didn't say if you're caught infiltrating the intelligence services, you will be taken to a court, and if found guilty, one of the possible sentences is that you will be shot, which is what a lawyer would say. He said you will be shot. Okay? Which Idi Amin used to refer to as the shortcut. He used to say, what is the point of all these courts and tribunals? Just do the shortcut. Okay, so my point is that I think that we need to ask ourselves the question, are we misleading, or are we allowing ourselves to also be misled? Who defines what news is? Okay, and who should define what news is? Is it that every time some big man, and it's usually a man or former big man, calls a press conference, we all have to go there and attend? Why? I mean, if so, yeah, who decided that? Or if we claim that I am the head of the newsroom, I'm the senior journalist and so on, are we the ones who decide? And if we are the ones who decide, do we have the tools? Have we read enough and researched enough and paid enough attention to the last 50 years to know what is important and what is not important? Or are we just allowing ourselves to be dragging on? So this is a question I'm asking you. Are we misleading, or are we allowing ourselves to be misled? Or perhaps in the process of allowing ourselves to be misled, are we also then misleading others? What would happen if you decided that I don't want to report another story about these two former big men for the next month, no matter what they say? Do you get what I'm saying? I don't know if this point is coming through clearly, because you can look at it in terms of deployment of cameras. There's only a fixed number of cameras in this country. I'm talking about video camcorders. So you have a situation where maybe there are 30 of them at a press conference and none in, I don't know, a particular town in Karamoja. Karamoja, according to a geologist I want to talk to, mile for mile, kilometer for kilometer, is more mineral rich than the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. This is what I was told by a geologist from Uganda. More mineral rich, mile for mile, than the Democratic Republic of Congo.